Hi, this video is related to the second part of the week 3 lecture notes. Now these lecture notes for some of you may look like they are actually quite abstract and difficult, but what I'd like to do is actually in this video encourage you to read the notes, but let me focus on what this concept of an object is to see if I can explain something to you which I hope will become clearer. I just want to make this screen a little bit bigger so you can see what I'm doing, and let's just expand that width a bit. Okay, so let's try that. Okay, so at the heart, let me open that up a bit so you can see, hopefully that's clear for you. So far you've been doing this, I don't know, my function. And what you've been doing is creating a piece of code, I'm generally just going to call it my function, where you might do some input, you might get some output, but it does something, right? It's the heart of a function is some kind of process. Functions typically, you can pass them stuff and they give you stuff back, but they are usually individual or particular a process of some kind. Now, a function is a really, really important concept for us. But now, in these lecture notes, you'll notice that Matthew has introduced the word object. Now, an object looks like a function. So if we go and have a look at, think back at the previous videos, you wrote code which looked like this. Okay, now that looks like a function, doesn't it? And if you remember all the notes that I've given you from week 1 and week 2, what you could have thought is that looks like a function. That's what I give the function. It does whatever it does and it stores the result over here. Now, why are you telling me this thing here is not a function? It's something called an object. What is the difference between a function and an object? Because when I look at them, the only difference I see is the first letter is capitalized here. And you're telling me that indicates it's an object and not a function. Well, this is why Matthew has introduced this particular concept to you in this lecture. And what I'd like to do is just give you an angle. If you think of a function as just some tiny bit of a process, okay, oops, it's gone out of focus. Let's get it back. If you think of a function like that, but if you think of an object as a collection of functions, right? So this is your object. It's a collection of related functions, or technically we call them methods. So hang on a second, you say, please don't get abstract on me. I find these notes of yours not as clear as the code. It's a legitimate point. Okay, so let's just have a look at the example. We had C equals circle in some of our code, and we had something like that. Okay, that is an object, and what it does is it has code inside here which will build the object and store it here. And did you notice that you wrote C, which is the name of the object, right? The variable is storing an object here, and you did things like this. You called a function called draw. You called a function called setFill. You called a function called move. In each of these cases, you have one object and it has lots and lots of different functions. So that is a really important concept. It's not strictly a collection, it's much more tightly organized. I mean, you collect them because all of these methods here are connected to this thing called a circle, to draw it, to fill it, to move it, to change its shape, etc., etc. They're all related to this object. Now, in the Python course, you will be using objects, especially in the graphics library. Okay. In the Java part of the course, after this term's study, you will be creating your own object. You'll be building the thing underneath to make it do stuff. But notice the way that this looks. When I run a function, okay, if I have a def let's get this on so you can see what just to make the distinction as clear as possible. If I have a def main, for example, and I have a bunch of code in there, when I want to use it, I just write the name of the function, don't I? Yep. But if I have an object, right, that I've built and constructed like this, when I want to run it, when I want to run a function, I have to name the object, and then I use the function on that object. Okay, so an object has a whole group of functions tied to it, all related, all making that object much more useful, and it's much easier to learn to code. Now, this video appearing after the first three, go back and look at the first three and have a look at how we used the point, which was a point object, and the circle, which was the circle object. And look at the code related to P dot, C dot, and so on. Matthew has this in the videos. The remainder part of this lecture and the lecture notes are about diagrams that you can use. And I would encourage you, rather than repeat them on notes, I would encourage you to go through it and make some initial notes. But keep in mind that the crucial distinction is between a function, which is a separate piece of a process, right? It's just a process, and an object which has a whole group of processes that you can use.